So how much do you spend on incentive compensation? 3, 5, 8%? Research shows that, on average, companies spend as much as 11% of their revenues and incentives on incentive compensation. Wow, you know, to be honest, that's a lot of money. And what about the cost to actually manage the producing the bonus and the people that run the processes? It can be significant. It's normally not included. Are we getting what we pay for? Now, this is interesting. We learned from a recent survey that 75% of organizations with 1,000 to 2,500 employees currently calculate commissions using spreadsheets. And 90% of them admit that they're dissatisfied with this method. So you can imagine doing something as complicated as incentive compensation using spreadsheets. You know, no wonder there's a lot of errors and dissatisfaction. In addition, it's very likely that one of the spreadsheets that's being used is created by somebody that's not even with the company anymore. And also, even if it was modified, the person who last modified it may not be around. And so, you know, a lot of the details of the spreadsheet aren't readily available. I can tell you that at Pfizer, many of our markets use spreadsheets. So we're guilty of this. We have the same problem, at least until I started this program. And I can tell you that everyone that I work with complains about the spreadsheets, that they're manual, can be slow, and are often the reason for mistakes. When changes are requested, it can be difficult to make the changes. Costly, time-consuming. Plus, we usually add new complexity to the system that wasn't designed to support the process. Then we need time, you know, to support the spreadsheet, and that takes away valuable time from other things that the folks can be working on. Also, we expect IC plans to become more complex, changing to meet business needs. And at the same time, we expect to deliver bonus from these plans in a cheaper, more efficient way. So there's a little bit of a problem in using a spreadsheet. They're very complicated, and at the same time, we want to simplify it and reduce the cost. So there's a battle there. So speaking of accuracy, how much are we overpaying? Some estimates have this cost of overpayment as being between 4 and 6% of total compensation. We also know from our own internal reviews and analysis that in some markets across our 7 regions, challenges exist due to limitations in the tools and shortcomings in the processes. So things like global strategy, governance, change management, and again, a tool designed specifically for IC will lead to reducing the chance for overpayments. So what are we going to talk about today? That's just to kind of frame out why we're talking about incentive compensation and some of the challenges that we have. So today I'd like to spend a few minutes to talk to you about the approach for incentive compensations that Pfizer took starting about 2 years ago. A few thoughts on how we position this new direction as we work to gain senior leadership approval, our global initiative, and a few key success factors and lessons learned. We started by clearly identifying the problem to senior leaders. And that's not to include, you know, the normal things of having the right tools and better defined processes. So we explained that plans are increasingly complex to understand and manage. We know that they must be motivational, fair, equal, and equitable. We know we have product launches, and we know that we have products that need different bonus plans, especially if they're in a different life cycle, you know, different phase of their life cycle. And we also know that there's quantitative measures, and now, in many cases, qualitative measures. It's critical that we're able to adapt to changes. You know, we all know that the marketplace is changing. We've spoken a lot about that over the last day or so. So we need new selling models, which could mean new and unique sales roles. For all of us, it's mission critical to follow the regulations and to be compliant. And of course, there's increasing competition from a variety of different places. We have heavy administrative burdens. So again, using a spreadsheet to process more complex plans is more difficult. We have more rapid-chasing business requirements, which require significant efforts to implement. And of course, speed to change is as important as ever. There's focus on back office savings. You know, everyone's looking to reduce the expenses I've mentioned. And of course, we want to be as efficient as possible because cycle time is always an issue. All of our stakeholders are concerned. And one of the things that's interesting is working from the incentive compensation team perspective, we really identified the fact to have some new skills within the team because we're trying to position ourselves as wanting to be valued partners instead of just order takers, which is relatively common in incentive compensation and sales processing. So at the very center of the key, the plans must drive the business strategy. So we explained this all to senior leaders and said that we really have this problem across all of our regions. And so we suggested that maybe we could take an approach that was more global instead of fixing this over and over again, the same thing in each region. Our leaders ask, why globalize IC now? Well, we have experience in globalizing many processes. You know, I think we all know, we look at all these processes here, and we've worked on globalizing these things. So we have some experience. And at Pfizer, we now have a global shared services organization, and IC falls within that group. Also, for some markets in Pfizer, some existing long-term contracts were coming up, and in addition, we had some IC processes that were clearly unsustainable in other markets. So the time is right. And honestly, at this point, with some of this conversation, we were beginning to convince the senior leaders that this might be an approach that would be good. So it was good. We were making progress at this point. So then we talked to them about global benefits. What would be the value of a global strategy and standardized toolbox? We explained we had a few core directives. We wanted to find 1 or 2 services that could replace Excel, modernize our IC processing capabilities, help to facilitate the sharing of best practices across our markets and regions, and if we were lucky, we could come up with a way to holistically measure IC across all the regions to provide a global view. We, of course, wanted to reduce our total cost to process IC, hope that we could simplify our plans, and have a strong need to increase accuracy. And if we were lucky to share the same toolbox, then maybe we could share resources within the region. They then asked, what about the market or country level? How would they benefit? So I said, well, you know, you have to be a little slow with these folks sometimes. I thought we were clear, but we continued to explain. The sales force would like plans they could understand, that are fair, equitable, equal. Local management would like plans they could easily explain, track, and guarantee are accurate. Countries' leaders wanted to be confident that the plans were motivational. They wanted to make sure that they could retain the talent in the organization. Encourage the right behaviors and obviously drive the business unit strategy. And as an added value, we would stop killing our local field force effectiveness teams because they would now have benefit of having a new, simpler way to process IC while trying to react to the expanding requirements. So they gave us the okay to move forward. This was good. They agreed with everything that we said, and they agreed that we should try to take a step forward in globalizing the approach. And so we asked ourselves, what did we get ourselves into? So just kidding. We asked if there was one global vendor. Could this vendor provide the services we wanted? These were some pretty high goals for ourselves. And unfortunately, as you can see from the chart here, we went through a pretty elaborate RFP process and found that no one vendor met our criteria. We then decided to adopt a 2-vendor solution and selected the 2 vendors that best fit the criteria. Premium Cegidine and ZS Associates were selected. We presented this to senior leaders, they approved, and now these 2 vendors provide Pfizer with IC services for 3 of our 7 regions. Today, I'd like to illustrate our engagement with Premium Cegidine. To date, Premium Cegidine is engaged in deploying a solution in 30 countries across Europe and Latin America and producing bonus for 6,000 REMS. One point to highlight in working with Premium Cegidine is their flexibility, and we were able to achieve in selecting the best tool combination for the individual markets. You can see here from the tool suite down in the lower left-hand corner that there's a number of different modules that they offer. And that combination of modules worked out really well for us. We were able to pick and choose what would make sense. And then as you can see from the grid on the right, not every country is using the same module in the tool set or has the same level of support provided. So some countries are full service, and will require support from the vendor as needed, while other countries have a high level of support in managing the IC plans and operations. We even allowed one country to be fully outsourced, which was kind of a little bit of a break away from our model, but one of the key issues is making sure that when you have a global solution that you still react to the local needs, and this need was to outsource. So different tool configurations and support levels. However, the environment is the same. Many of the same premium Sejadine resources are used across the countries and regions. The contracts, for the most part, are the same, and the service level agreements are very similar. And there's one governance model that's in place. And because of the tool selection, we were able to eliminate spreadsheets in those markets where we've rolled this out. So you can see here that the implementation process was standardized, not only across the countries, but across the region. And we were able to use many of these processes in other countries and other regions. So the same PMO process, including status reporting, issue resolution, and in many cases the same people were all engaged, further ensuring the sharing of best practices and lessons learned. And clearly the process worked for us, because as you can see, we deployed 15 countries in 11 months. From a key success factor perspective, the number one key success factor was the interrelationship between the global governance team and the local execution team. The global PMO and many of the core team and steering committee members remain the same regardless of the region being implemented. Governance, standard project methodology, and guidelines drive the project. The global PMO manages the overall timelines. They're responsible for the vendor management and is the escalation point for the issue resolutions. Now at the local level, there's a project manager along with the country field force effectiveness team that drive the implementation based on the local needs, and I think that's what's really key. There's back office vendor support should it be needed. So here's what's important on this slide. The global governance provides the strategy, support, and guidelines. Then the country implements the solution based on the specific local requirements while staying within those global guidelines and constraints. Okay, so after implementing this solution across 30 countries, what did we learn? Don't do it again. No. Just kidding. We still have 40 more countries to do, so there's quite a bit more out there that we have to address. But seriously, the first is simplify, simplify, simplify. You've got to clean up your IC plans before you can even consider implementing them into a new tool. We tried. In our Latin America engagement, we went in to Mexico, which is one of the big markets there for us, and attempted to implement the incentive compensation plans as is right into the premium Sejadine solution, and failed miserably. It was very very difficult, very time consuming. Blew out all my timelines and resource allocations, and so obviously we realized we had to stop and consider a different approach for the 9 countries that we're working with in Latin America. And so we took a step back and said, okay, what could we do here? And working with Premium Sejadine, we came up with what we call a recommendation phase, where we took a sample of data from each of the countries. We took their incentive compensation plans, and we were able to simulate within the Premium Sejadine tool what those plans were delivering. And from that, we were able to analyze what opportunities there were to optimize the plans, to either eliminate some plans or reduce the complexity of the plans by looking at different ways of shaping the payout curves and the way that the products and weights were all being managed within the process. And then once we identified that, we then went back to the leadership in each one of the countries and presented that to them, and got really good results. They were very impressed with what we were able to provide as solutions. And many of those ideas were adopted, which is good news obviously for the implementation team, because we were able to reduce the complexity, reduce the number of plans, and that actually helped us to continue on to the schedule that we had for implementing across the 9 countries. So that approach really worked well. Number 2, don't try and force all of your global directives down to the local level. There's things that are going to happen in each country that are unique, and they can't be changed right away. For example, in many of the Latin America countries, they work on 12 cycles a year. So every month they're running incentive compensation and delivering bonus checks. They have something that they call a recovery process, which normally you would smooth your incentive compensation data over a large period of time and then look to see how those trends to come up with any type of additional bonus payment based on the peaks and valleys in the data. Well, they're doing that on a monthly basis. So we analyzed all that and came back to them and said, really we think it might be better if you do incentive compensation 4 times a year, so on a quarterly basis, which is kind of standard. We saw this in Europe. We were able to convert some countries in Europe from monthly to quarterly and even semesterly. So we thought we had some pretty strong ground to stand on. No, not at all. It was a very tough conversation, and there were some big learnings that there are issues in countries in Latin America where there's a very strong reason why there are 12 times, payments 12 times a year. So we left it. We didn't force it. We left it in place. And it's something that from an evolutionary perspective, as we continue to work with the teams closely and have the Premium Sedgidine folks involved in the tools, running the tools, that maybe it's something that we can do over time. 3, simple but key. Make sure that the people you need to do the project are not already allocated to other projects. In some of the small countries, actually in most of the countries, the local resources, they wear many hats. They have a lot of different responsibilities. And as they see these types of projects coming in, they could very easily overcommit. And don't let them, because we actually found that there were 2 or 3 other business technology type projects that were running along at the same time. They were heavily involved in those particular projects, and we had issues with meeting our timelines and making sure that the implementation was running according to schedule. Have weekly status meetings with all the countries in the region and share the good and the bad. We found that in general, people really enjoy these weekly meetings. I would pull together a status report and have a separate page for every country that we were working with and talk to, even though it was a large group and sometimes there's 40 or 50 people on the conference call and we're doing a WebEx, and sometimes the communications and the technology isn't the best, but we have everybody engaged and involved, and people like to share the successes. That's real positive. On the other side, when there are issues, it takes a little time for people to get used to it, but eventually they'll share their problems with the larger group, and they'll even ask for help from the other countries in trying to resolve their issues. So it's a good team building type of thing. It helps to build a user community, because of course everyone's using the same tool across the entire region. So one of the things I'm trying to push is that sharing of resources and knowledge of how to do different things. So number 5, all of your partners need to really be partners. Everyone has to be committed. We know that there's situations that are going to occur where it's going to be an extraordinary type of event, and you're going to need help from your partners. Partners do this without complaining. They do this without pulling a contract up and saying, look, it's not here. And they do it from the perspective of really caring about getting the right solution in place at the right time for the right reason. And last but certainly not least, as a global team working with the regional team, there are going to be cultural differences. There's going to be cultural issues that you have to be very aware and sensitive to. And we found that that took a little time to get some experience on, but we realized that that was really important, and we spend a lot of time on that now. An example of this is in Europe, we found that we could very easily drive the project using WebEx, basically virtual, teleconferences and WebEx and things like that. Number of reasons for that. I think the organization is a little bit more mature in the Europe group. But be that as it may, it still worked well in doing WebEx and teleconferencing. In our Latin America region, so okay, the organization isn't quite as mature, but we found that face-to-face was absolutely needed. There was no question about it. We had to develop very close working relationships on a one-to-one basis before we really could conduct business and be successful in having weekly status meetings and things of that sort. So, I'm just about perfect on time here. Thank you for your time. I hope in a little bit of talking that I've done about this project that my experiences will help your journey be a little easier if you choose to go down this path. So, thank you.